Good morning! It's Debbie and Callie. And, give it a second, Captain Ian, and we're aboard Fluke this morning. We are on Long Island Sound. We are in the Long Island Sound estuary just off of Avery Point in Groton, Connecticut. So if you're just joining us, Long Island Sound is an estuary, and we're pretty fortunate to have this natural resource just off the coast of Connecticut. So some of the key features of an estuary are that there is brackish water here, so a mixture of salt and fresh water together. It's pretty shallow when compared to the depth of the ocean. Our average depth in Long Island Sound is about 65 feet, but our boat isn't in nearly that much water right now. And then the last characteristic of an estuary is that it's semi-enclosed. It's got land on at least 3 sides, but it has an opening to the ocean. So off in this direction that way is the Atlantic Ocean, bringing in salt water. And in this direction is the Thames River, bringing in fresh water. So we have a mixture of salt and fresh, and being surrounded by land also means that it's a little bit more protected in here than it would be in the open ocean. And it's also highly influenced by things that are happening on land. So I want you guys to keep that in mind as we're doing our experiment today, or our data collection. So think about things that were happening yesterday that could influence Long Island Sound and the water today. So if you can think of something that would make the water a little bit different today, go ahead and post that in the comments. But what a difference it makes out here today, Callie, compared to yesterday.
That's right. Yesterday in the same spot there were 7 to 8 foot seas, and today you can see nothing close to that. Much calmer. There's a little breeze, but again, nothing like they were forecasting yesterday. So we're happy to be out here and on the water. And hopefully you tuned in last week when Debbie and I set some lobster traps out here in Long Island Sound. We took some measurements of the bottom conditions. Today we're here to pull those traps and see what kind of creatures we can find in our lobster pots.
Sweet. All right. Well, if we have any teachers watching, welcome. If we have any students watching, we're excited that you're here joining us. So think about if you feel like telling us what school you're from, we'll shout you out. Bridgeport Aquaculture School teacher here.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Thank you for tuning in. We do have a worksheet that accompanies our video today. It's at https://bit.ly/lobsterpot worksheet. So you can go check that out. We're going to go ahead and get ready and get into position to pull our first trap. So we have a couple of answers here. Iris, age 6, thinks there might be more fresh water in the sound today. Great hypothesis, Iris. After all the rain we had yesterday. Hi, Sandy. Sandy DeRosa.
Yay, hi, Sandy.
After all the rain we had yesterday, we're thinking that the water might be a little fresher. And being close to land means that all of the water that fell on the land will actually drain to Long Island Sound. Good morning, Ledgerd Middle School. All that rain from the land, so it's not just going to come here straight old clean rainwater, is it, Callie?
Nope, not at all. It's going to pick up everything in its path as it was moving from the land into Long Island Sound. So it could be picking up bits of dirt and sediment and possibly even pollution on its way.
Yeah, that's not so good. We'll talk a little bit more about our watershed next week in honor of our Earth Week celebration. But some other things that might be in the water today because of those big waves is we're actually getting some more influence from the ocean as well. So we might see some different organisms. Plants and animals can be pushed around by those giant waves from the storm. So coming up along the bow of the boat here, we can see our very first lobster buoy. So what you guys don't know is after our video last week, we went out and set 2 extra lobster traps. So we can take a data set today. Good morning, Winthrop Elementary School.
Oh, good morning.
Okay, so Callie and Captain Ian are going to coordinate to pull up this trap. You can see the buoy has our blue and white checker pattern and an orange marker, so we can see it a little more easily. Callie's using what we call a boat hook. It's a hook you use on a boat. So she's going to use that and pull up the buoy line.
Remember our blue and white checkerboard pattern here on our buoy. That's how we know this is our trap and not somebody else's. So remember, there were bricks in this to help it sink down to the bottom. It's pretty heavy. Oh yeah.
Woo-wee!
You can see some algae on the line.
Gallup Hill School. Good morning, Marissa and Haley.
All right, here we
Ooh,
go.
If horseshoe crabs might come in with the big waves. They just might. They're kind of clumsy and get pushed around a lot by waves. I don't think we'll find those in our trap today, because if you watched our video last week, the opening is not quite large enough for anything but the smallest horseshoe crab.
Okay, Debbie,
Here's our very first trap. We're going to call this trap number 1 for the purposes of our data set today.
I'm going to spin it around.
Gosh,
make it a little
first
easier.
thing I'm noticing is how much algae is stuck to our trap. Now, it's been sitting in the water for about a week now.
Yep.
So there's some red algae here.
Oh, but I see something even better. Take a look in there, Debbie.
Woo! Can you guys see that at home, guys? All right. We got, I can see something more than just lobsters in here, though, huh, Callie?
All right, I'm going to start to pull some things out so you can get a better view.
All right.
Take a look at that.
Beautiful lobster. It's got a lot to say right now. So that behavior right there, it's flapping its tail to try to get away from Callie. That's a great strategy if you're in water, because that makes them swim a little bit. When they're in the air, though, it's not so effective, huh?
So what I'm noticing besides that flapping tail, take a look at those monster claws. They're pretty large, right?
Yeah.
So
keep your fingers well away from that.
If we look closely at those claws, does everybody notice at home they're different shapes? That means they're designed to do different jobs. What do you think they do? I'll tell you, this larger one here is what we call the crusher claw. You can see it has these big sort of bumps right inside. So think about what it might crunch through. And this is the ripping claw or the tearing claw. See how it's a little bit more narrow and it's kind of got sharper teeth in between.
If I can get any closer without it getting blurry. Oh, that's pretty good.
What do you think that one's designed to do? The cruncher and the ripper claw.
Okay, think about that. Put it in the comments. We'll take a couple answers in a minute. What other adaptations do we think? I bet right now that the water is pretty murky down near the bottom. How would a lobster sense its environment? Well, I can see their little eyes right here. Can you guys get a good look at those eyes? Now, they actually have pretty advanced eyes, although it doesn't do them much good because it's so murky down where they live. So they need to rely on their sense of touch a lot. So some things that they can use to touch with.
Can you see these?
Is called an antenna.
Yeah, or
they have 2 antennae.
Yep.
And then they also have 2 smaller ones right here. So the antennae are really good for touch. And then these little ones here are called antennules, and they're really more for like tasting little like food or dissolved things that are in the water. And they also have sort of like bristly legs. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show that very clearly with this video, but they have sort of bristles on their legs that can also taste the water around them. So they can sort of tiptoe along the bottom and be able to taste things that are nearby. So that's 2 ways that they can sense their environment. Tasting all around them, feeling with their antennae, but also seeing too.
Yeah, and let's take a closer look at those legs while we have the opportunity. Those first 2 have little pinchers, almost like the claws that we showed you earlier. Can you get a good view of that?
Yeah, that looks great.
And then the second 2 are lacking those claws. They actually just come to a point. And so those are really used for walking around. And I bet you can guess what these might help the lobster to do that have those small claws.
All right, so I've seen a couple guesses about our crushing and pinching claws. Things that we might, keep your fingers away from that. Good advice, Randy. So some of the things that they might need to crush would be their food, right? So they didn't turn down the bait that we put in this trap. That's how they got stuck in here in the first place. But they can crunch through hard shells, and then they also might need to fight. So they're kind of territorial. They don't like to share their space, so they might need to like crunch down on a rival's claw with that crusher claw. Oh, Heather, you're absolutely right. Lobsters are crustaceans. Excellent. That pincher claw or the cutter claw is really good for pulling meat out of a carcass, getting every last little bit and ripping it into pieces. So sounds pretty gruesome, but if you're going to eat something that that you find along the ocean floor, you need to have the tools, a knife and a fork, so to speak.
All right, so let's flip this lobster over and take a look at the underside of its body and point out a few things here. Okay, so when we look closely at the tail, you can see these little, almost like fins. We call them swimmerets or pleopods, right? And so they're able to kind of move these and help flap. And it provides oxygen when they're living down in the bottom, maybe in a burrow or in a crevice of a rock. So it helps to oxygenate their gills. By looking at the shape of these swimmerets, we can also identify whether this lobster is a male or a female. So we have to look closely at the first pair. And that's where my fingers are touching right now. You can probably tell they look a little bit different than the rest. When I touch them with my fingers, they feel kind of hard compared to all the other ones. They feel really soft and kind of feathery. And so if this first pair of swimmerets is hard and almost has this whitish color, that lets us know that this lobster is a male. If the first pair is soft and feathery like the others you see, that lets us know that the lobster is a female. Okay, and we don't have two side by side, but one other little trick that you can use is the width of their tail. Females typically have a wider tail. Anybody know why?
Why do you think females have a wider tail? Go ahead and post that in the comments. It's on purpose.
Yep, by design.
Right, so our lobster's kind of separated into three main segments besides their legs and their claws. A lot of people refer to this part right here as the tail, but that's kind of just the restaurant version of it. So could you flip him over again for a second, Callie? Since they are crustaceans and they are arthropods, they actually have some body parts that are named the same as insects. So this part here is a combination of the head and the thorax. So we call it the cephalothorax. This from the very tip of the rostrum to this joint right here is the cephalothorax. Then this whole part here that people call the tail is actually called the abdomen. Just these sort of paddles at the back are the true tail of the lobster. Oh, so we've got Greta guesses that it helps them escape better. The females have wider tails to help them escape better.
Good thought, Greta.
That's a good thought. There's actually another purpose for a wide tail on a female. Randy wants to know what are the chances of putting a camera on a lobster. The risk to that is since they're arthropods and they're crustaceans, they molt their exoskeleton from time to time. So we might risk losing our camera if we were to attach a camera to the lobster itself. Marissa got this. Females need to hold the eggs underneath their abdomen. So they'll actually use those swimming legs, those pleopods, to hold the eggs in place. And they'll walk around for a couple of months with those underneath their body and then release them. So that's a great strategy for a female to have more space down there to hold her extra eggs.
That's right. All right, so let's set this lobster down for now. I'm going to grab a bucket. Thank you. And we'll see what else we have in here because we actually have some other organisms in this trap. We have, thank you.
There we go, in the bucket.
Okay, excellent. We'll come back to that lobster in just a minute. But we have some other organisms that we want to share with you.
Oh, but we were trying to get lobsters.
I know, that was our goal. We did call this piece of science gear a lobster trap or a lobster pot, but look.
If you tuned in to Kyle and Marissa's Getting Crabby Facebook Live a couple weeks ago, you might know this animal. It's a spider crab.
That's right. So spider crabs are scavengers. They're looking for an easy meal, and this lobster trap offered just that. They were attracted to that bait, so they came in to feast on that bait provided. So we can take a look at this creature too, also an example of a crustacean, right, related to that lobster. So you may notice some similarities between the lobster and the crab.
They got some claws, but those sure look different than the claws we saw in the lobster.
Sure do.
Right. Real narrow, skinny, not very sharp. Nope. So they're not going to be able to do any crunching or crushing with those claws, but they can do some picking, just like our other lobster.
So designed to pick up food and bring it right to their mouth parts. This may be a good view if you can see right underneath that rostrum is their mouth parts. You may see it move around a little bit. but that's where they can bring food. They have similar legs to those lobsters. We can see that they have 4 walking legs, and again, each one of those comes to a point, giving us a clue that this animal is walking along down on the bottom and not doing much swimming at all, actually. So this is a walking crab, although we do have some species that can swim in Long Island Sound. And since we looked at males and females with our lobsters, we clear some of this algae away. So again, we're looking at that abdomen shape here on the bottom, and if you look, I'm kind of tracing with my finger this narrow shape. Kind of reminds me of a lighthouse. That sort of narrow shape lets me know that this spider crab, in fact, is a male. A female has a much wider abdomen, almost like the shape of a pocket. And if you were thinking that's because she holds eggs there, you're right. So a female has a much wider abdomen. We'll see if we have one in our trap here. And the male has a much narrower abdomen.
Okay, so far we have 1 male lobster and 1 male spider crab. Now, we're going to refer to our spider crab as bycatch.
Right.
Because this was not our intended target for our piece of equipment today. We caught something that did not belong in our trap. Now, with this type of fishing, the lobster, if they wander in there, that's we can study them. We're not going to eat them, but we catch them for science purposes. And the bycatch that we get in here, we can just release back to the environment without any significant harm to them. But that's not the case with all types of fishing. Bycatch can happen with fishing rods. They can happen with nets. Bycatch happens all the time, every day, and there's some animals that don't survive well when being caught in a trap or a net and being released again. So that's something that we'd have to think about. If you can think about a type of fishery that might have some bycatch, post it in the comments for us while we pull up the rest of these animals. So we're going to record on our whiteboard today. We've got sort of a big version of a data sheet here. So I have broken it down into our 3 traps. And we're going to record how many males and females of lobsters or bycatch we find. If I can get the marker out of my pocket. My hands are kind of cold. Okay. What are you finding over here,
Okay,
Callie?
so I've
Report
got
out to me.
1 more lobster, and what I want to tell you about this
Look
one,
at this one.
this shell looks much different. I can try to get a side by side. Sorry if we're bending over here in front of you, but let me get the other lobster. The first one. Besides their size being a little bit different, take a close look at their shells. Right on their carapace here, or on the outside, you can see that there is some pitting on this lobster, almost like it has little burn marks on it. Same thing on its tail here. That's an indication of shell disease. So that's one of the stresses that's really affecting the lobster population here in Long Island Sound.
Look at that. Oh.
So it's a bacteria in the water that actually eats away at the shell of the lobster. And so the next time it molts, if it's not so severe, hopefully that shell disease will be gone, and that new shell or exoskeleton that it has in place will look clean. It is okay, if you're wondering, to still eat the meat of a lobster that has shell disease. Although if you were paying a lot of money at a restaurant for a lobster dinner, you probably wouldn't want it to look like this, right?
Yeah, we kind of move so that you can get a sunny view
with
of
the
that, 'cause
sunshine.
you can really see the abdomen there is kind of really chewed up. Poor lobster. All right, well, let's take a look at the underside and see if we can tell if it's male or female.
All right, great idea.
We let go of the other guy.
Whoops, sorry.
Sorry, friend. All
Okay.
right.
So
I can see the pleopods right there, and then right above, the first set is rigid. So is that male or female?
That's a male.
That is a male.
Two
Exactly
male
right.
lobsters.
2 male lobsters. One with shell disease.
Okay.
All right. So I couldn't find my marker, so I'm just going to grab the blue one I've got right here. So trap number 1 had 1, 2 male lobsters. So far we have 1 male spider crab as our bycatch.
Okay,
Let's see what else
so
we got.
I've got 3 more spider crabs covered in algae again, and all 3 of those are male.
3 more male bycatch.
That's right.
Okay. So far we've caught more bycatch than we have lobster. Not our target.
Okay, let's see. I've got
What do we have here?
2 more.
2 more, both male. It
Male,
looks like.
that's
and
right.
Still just spider crabs. So
That's right.
So far, we've only caught 2
Okay.
species, so that brings us to 5.
Add one more male crab, male spider crab to that list, Debbie.
Very good.
And
Whoa.
one more small male
One more
spider
small
crab.
male hiding in there. All right, so that brings us to a total of 8 spider crabs and 2 lobsters. So no girls yet this morning. We'll see what we find in our next trap.
Okay, so I think what we'll do, Debbie, is we'll get this back in the water. Our bait still looks good. So we'll set this again and maybe you can join us and we'll pull it again another time.
Yeah. See if we can catch some more lobsters or a different.
Yeah.
Okay. So Captain Ian's going to get us into location, into position to drop this trap.
That's right.
Oh, Kyle wants to know why so many spider crabs.
Well, I think it has to do with food availability, right? That free meal is too good to pass up. These spider crabs are usually hanging out in the same kinds of environments as those lobsters, and so spider crabs, I would say, are probably our most common bycatch.
They're really abundant in Long Island Sound.
That's right.
Too. There's tons of them here. They're pretty well adapted for this environment. They can tolerate the cold water in the wintertime. They can tolerate changes in oxygen levels, salinity, and there's a lot of food.
And in terms of fisheries, that's one of the species in Long Island Sound that people aren't interested in eating, okay? And so if we catch them like we did today, we'll end up tossing them back into Long Island Sound. So.
Not much eating on those legs,
No.
huh? Yeah, we caught mostly males today too. We'll see with our next 2 traps if we catch any females in there, but it may be related to the behaviors of the males and females may be different. The males might be more mobile or more willing to go out looking for food. They're also a little bit larger when fully grown, so maybe they're just hungrier. All right.
Right, so we're getting into position. Remember, we're trying to get along the rocky shore here. Just waiting for the word from the captain. Here we go.
Out it goes. See you next time.
All right.
Okay. So I'm actually going to hand the camera off to you if you don't mind, Callie. I'll pull the
Okay.
second trap.
Sounds great.
So, howdy do. And there's your marker.
Thank you.
Okay. The cat
All right.
fart's right here too.
Thank you. So we're out here kind of scanning the waters. Again, we're looking for that blue and white checkerboard pattern. We've got a couple more pots to pull. I'm going to show you what's inside those other pots and we'll collect a data set on our catch as well, and we'll see if we have more bycatch or if we have more lobsters in this next one.
Ooh, I'm hoping for lobsters, Callie.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Maybe some females in our trap as well. We'll
Oh,
see
that
what
would
we
be great
find.
to be
Yeah,
able
we
to
can
show the
them
difference.
abdomen.
Yep. All right, so
I can
see our pot
buoy.
right off the bow. So Captain Ian is getting us into position so we can grab that trap. Debbie's getting ready with her boat hook here.
Whoa. Not sure.
Okay, a nice snag. Whoop.
Oh boy.
Oh, Margot wants to know if fish ever swim into these pots.
Oh, sure. Sometimes we'll find, let's see, cunner in there. We found black sea bass. I think I found a winter flounder in there one time. I'm not sure what he was thinking. But.
Yep, even blackfish or tautags we've
Oh,
seen in there
yes.
before. Yep,
Skate.
skate as well, absolutely. So yes, oftentimes we do catch blue crab or fish in there as part of our bycatch. Yeah, this is the heavy one. This has double bricks in here, Debbie. You got it?
Okay, so let's take a look at what's inside trap number 2.
Trap number 2.
What's behind door number 2? Okay, so I'm looking around this part. Here's the kitchen with the bait. I don't see anybody in there.
Nobody in the
But-
kitchen. Dun dun dun.
I have a little friend right here.
Woo!
Wow, look at the size of this one compared to.
And that lobster gauge is a size that's set, in our case, by Connecticut DEEP and part of the Atlantic Fisheries region here. And so it's got that set size, and we use it right on the carapace. So can you see that metal lobster gauge Debbie is holding there?
So between the 2 points that are at the end here, we have a buoy on it in case we drop it in the water. That we know ourselves. So it's got the little 2 pointy parts. If the lobster is at least as long as the distance between the 2 pointy parts, then it's a legal size lobster.
And that's the lobster carapace.
Yes, the carapace, the cephalothorax. So
Right.
from the eye socket to the very end of the cephalothorax, that's how we would know it's legal. So I'm going to go ahead and put this gauge on the back of the lobster. Excuse me, sir.
Tell me if you need a hand.
Okay, so this gauge reaches past the end of the cephalothorax.
Thing we've ever found in a lobster pot, and maybe we can ask Captain Ian about
Captain
this one
Ian's
too.
been here quite a long time. What's the strangest thing we've ever pulled up in a lobster trap?
One time we found 2 conger eels. That
Whoa!
was pretty cool because they're not really native to Long Island Sound. They're found more in the east near Rhode Island, Narragansett Bay. So that was pretty interesting. They were both almost 3 feet long. They were very large.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
That was one of the neatest catches
Conger
we ever
eels.
had. It was right about here where the pot was too. So
very cool.
that's the first thing that comes to mind as an unusual catch for around our area.
Okay, and I think it's hard for people to hear Captain Ian at home, and so I'll repeat what he just said. The strangest thing that we've ever caught here, right off the shores of Avery Point, was actually a conger eel. We had 2 of them in one trap, almost about 3 feet long, so that's pretty cool.
Okay, so I've got another lobster right here. I'm going to use my gauge to see if it's legal. Put it right in the eye socket, and it is just a little bit longer than the length of the claw. So is it legal? Yep. All right, so this one is legal. Now I also want to show you we have our first girl.
We'll record that.
So record that.
So another
And-
male lobster.
I got some bycatch in here for sure.
Skip the last pot. All right, so just taking a look at what our bycatch is, and this pot looks like more spider crabs.
That's right. Okay, I've got 4, and they're all male. I didn't even have to look at their underside because I know that females don't typically grow this large.
Bye from me as well, and also from Captain Ian. Thank you.
So after we pull a lobster trap, we actually take a data set where we record information about our catch. We will record not only the number of lobsters that we catch and their sex, but we can also measure their size. So Callie will demonstrate how to measure that in a moment. And the last piece of information that we collect is related to shell disease. So shell disease is a pathogen that attacks the exoskeleton of the lobsters, and the way that we identify how much shell disease is on there is based on percentages. So if there are no shell disease symptoms at all, we would record a 0 as the shell disease index. If the lobster has between 1 and 10% of its shell infected with shell disease, we would record it as a shell disease index of 1. 11 to 50% is an index of 2, and 50% or more is diseased would be considered a shell disease index of 3. So we did have some shell disease on our lobsters today. So Callie, if you want to take a look at this lobster here, it has shell disease, and I would say that at least 50% of its body or more is affected or diseased. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I would. I would agree with that.
Yeah, so this lobster is hurting, but the good news is if this lobster molts, that disease leaves with the molt. So when it sheds its exoskeleton, it will be cleared of the disease. So we can hope that this lobster will molt soon.
Okay, so that would be an SDI or shell disease index of 3. Great. So you can record that on your data sheet, right?
The other thing I need to know on my data sheet, it asks me to put the size of the lobster and the shell disease and whether or not it's male or female. So before I can record the shell disease index, I'm going to flip this over very quickly and note that this is a male lobster. So I can tell by looking at the structures that are directly above those pleopods. So shell disease index of 3 on my male.
Okay.
All right.
So we want to show you how to take a measurement of this lobster next. So we'll kind of pass off our camera here. The tool that we're going to use to do that is basically a type of ruler. We call it a caliper, okay? And so that caliper actually can stretch, and we're going to put these prongs between the carapace. So starting at the eye socket, and we're going to measure right down to the end of that carapace where it meets up with the segmented tail. Okay, and then I can remove the caliper and it holds on to that size. And what I'm looking for is the 0. Whatever number matches up with that 0 is going to tell me the size of this lobster in millimeters. So this one, you can see the 0 matches right up to that 80. This is 80 millimeters long.
So same as our lobster before, 80 millimeters.
All right, so I want to show you how to measure a spider crab. Remember, that was one of our bycatch in our trap. We're also going to measure the carapace, but this time we're going to measure a little bit differently. We're going to measure the widest part of the carapace, so right across its body. So I'm going to stretch my calipers out, find the widest part of that body. Whoop. When I have it, I can pull my calipers up. Again, I'm looking for that 0, and whatever number matches up with that 0 is going to be the size of our crab. And so this one is 70 millimeters.
Okay, so 70 millimeters, and that's a male spider crab, so I'll record that right here. So I guess we cut out while we were aboard the boat today. Sorry about that, but we want to make sure that you guys got to see the female lobster versus the male lobster that we pulled up in the second trap. So right behind me, Callie has our lobsters. I'm just going to flip the camera.
So take a close look. To see the difference, we're looking at the swimmerettes here, the pleopods, and we're looking at the very first pair. So right here where I'm touching now, that is soft and kind of feathery to the touch. So this is a female lobster. And if we compare that over here to the first pair of the swimmerettes on the male, you can already see they look different, right? More rigid, kind of a white color. So this one is the male. And then if Debbie shows you sort of the tails side by side, the female
It's definitely wider.
is much wider than the male.
So that's about it for our lobster adventure today. I hope you enjoyed it. We hope you can join us on Thursday at 9:30 Facebook Live. Kyle and Molly will be discussing fish adaptations, including body shape, mouth shape, and tail shape. We're excited about that. And next week, in honor of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, we're going to have a whole Earth week. So keep your eyes peeled for our schedule of programming coming up next week. And we're so glad that you joined us. We'll see you for Earth Week next week.